The floating cliffs of Oran reached high into the endless sky. They looked like giant stones hanging above the clouds, shining in soft golden light. The wind around them was strong but warm. Long green vines hung down from the edges, and bright birds flew between the rocks, singing clear songs. This was the home of the Skyborn. They were a proud race who ruled the open skies with their great winged creatures called Ikran. Rian stood near the cliff's edge, feeling the wind on his face. His short black hair moved in the air, and his hands were firm on his flight gloves. He was the only human pilot in this training camp. Around him stood dozens of young Skyborn trainees with blue and silver skin. Their eyes were bright and their wings folded neatly behind their backs. They whispered to each other and stared at him with doubt. They believed only Skyborn could fly with an Ikran. To them, a human was only a ground walker. The training ground was wide and smooth. White stones formed a long, flat path that led to the edge of the cliff. At the far side rested several Ikran. Their wings were long and sharp. Their scales shone like polished metal under the bright sky. Each creature had a unique color. One was green like a leaf, one gold like sunlight, and one deep blue like the night sky. They were not just animals. They were sky partners. A Skyborn who bonded with an Ikran was called a rider, and riders were honored. Among the Skyborn trainees stood Lyra. She was known as one of the best young flyers in the camp. Her long silver hair waved behind her, and her eyes carried a mix of pride and challenge. She stepped forward and crossed her arms. Everyone grew quiet. Lyra was never soft with words. She liked to test others. She believed that skill was proven in action, not in talk. She looked at Ryan straight in the eye. Her voice was clear and sharp like a blade in the wind. "If you are a real pilot, then prove it by riding my Ikran." Gasps spread across the training ground. No Skyborn had ever allowed someone else to ride their Ikran. It was a bond of trust. If an outsider tried, the Ikran usually threw them off the moment they touched its back. Lyra's Ikran was a strong, deep blue creature. It stood tall with folded wings and glowing eyes. It looked at Rian as if it already knew what was about to happen. The other trainees started whispering again. Some laughed softly. One said that the human would not even get close to the creature. Another said he would run away. Ryan heard everything, but he did not speak. He only looked at Lyra with calm eyes. His heart was beating fast, but he did not show fear. He had trained in many places before this. He had flown many strange crafts. But this was different. This was not a machine. This was a living being. Lyra raised her hand and pointed toward her Ikran. "Go ahead," she said with a teasing smile. "Show us how strong human pilots are." Ryan took a slow breath. The wind blew across the cliff and lifted a few loose leaves into the air. He stepped forward. Every eye followed him. Even the Ikran raised its head to watch him. Its wings shifted slightly, and it let out a low cry that echoed across the floating cliffs. Ryan stopped a few steps away from it. The creature's eyes were deep and bright like shining crystals. He could see its breath moving in and out. Its muscles were tense. It was waiting to see what he would do. He remembered his first day in the camp. The Skyborn leader had said that the bond between rider and Ikran was made not by strength, but by trust. The creature had to feel the heart of the rider. Machines did not care about heart. They followed buttons and switches. But this was a creature of the wind. It needed to know him. Lyra stood with her arms crossed, watching him. A few Skyborn whispered that he should step back now before the Ikran scared him, but Rian kept walking slowly. He lifted his hand and showed his palm. His movements were calm and clear. The Ikran tilted its head. Its eyes narrowed for a moment, but it did not step back. That small reaction made some Skyborn go quiet. The ground under his boots was smooth. The air was thick with the scent of wind and feathers. Ryan was close enough to hear the breathing of the creature now. It let out a stronger cry, louder than before, but he did not flinch. He lowered his voice and spoke softly. The words were not magic, but they carried his calm feeling. "I am not here to fight you. I want to fly with you." Lyra raised her brow. She had not expected him to speak to the creature like that. None of the Skyborn said anything. The Ikran blinked slowly. Its head lowered a little, still watching him. Ryan could see its sharp teeth and strong neck. He stretched his hand just a bit more and gently touched the side of its neck. For one long second, the creature hissed. Its wings opened halfway, and the Skyborn thought it would push him away. But then the sound faded. The wings closed again. The creature stood still. A soft wave of silence moved through the crowd. The Skyborn who had been laughing were now quiet. Even Lyra's smile faded into surprise. No outsider had ever touched an Ikran without being pushed back. Ryan felt the creature's skin under his fingers. It was warm and smooth, but strong like polished stone. He could feel the heartbeat. He took another step closer and placed his other hand on the saddle that rested just behind the neck. He looked at Lyra. She met his eyes, but said nothing. Slowly, Ryan lifted his leg and climbed onto the saddle. The Ikran shifted its weight and let out a soft sound, almost like a warning, but not a rejection. Ryan moved carefully, making sure every motion was steady. His hands held the soft strap attached to the saddle. His body leaned forward. His heart beat faster than before, but he kept his face calm. The Skyborn around him stared without a word. Many of them had trained for years to earn this position, and now a human had reached it in a few moments. But Ryan knew this was only the beginning. Climbing onto the back of an Ikran was not the same as flying with one. The creature could still throw him off the moment it jumped from the cliff. This was a test, not a victory. Lyra walked closer to the cliff edge. Her Ikran stretched its wings wide. The wind picked up strong and loud. The blue feathers glowed in the sunlight. Ryan held on tightly, not with fear but with focus. He could feel the strength of the creature beneath him. It was like sitting on a wave ready to rise. Lyra shouted over the wind, "Let us see if you can keep your seat in the sky." The Ikran leaped forward. It jumped off the cliff with a powerful push. The wind rushed past them like a river. Ryan felt his stomach rise as they fell for a short moment before the wings opened wide. The creature caught the air with a strong flap and began to glide. The world around them turned into endless blue sky and rolling clouds. The floating cliffs grew smaller behind them. Ryan leaned forward, matching the motion of the creature. The first turn came fast. The Ikran tilted its body to the right. Ryan tightened his grip but kept his breathing even. He remembered his training with fast craft. He knew how to follow motion rather than fight it. He moved with the Ikran instead of against it. The second turn came sharper. A few Skyborn on the cliff gasped. But Ryan stayed on. Lyra watched from above on another platform. She had expected him to fall in the first turn, but he was still on the creature's back, riding the wind with it. A mix of surprise and a hint of respect grew in her eyes. The Ikran glided back toward the cliff. Its wings folded slightly as it slowed down. With a smooth landing, it touched the stone surface again. Dust rose in a small cloud under its claws. Ryan slid down from the saddle and stood on the ground. His heart was still racing, but he held his shoulders straight. The Skyborn trainees stared at him. None of them laughed now. Some looked confused. Some looked amazed. And some looked a little proud. Lyra walked toward him slowly. Her eyes were still on her Ikran, who stood calm beside him. She stopped a few steps away and crossed her arms again. But her smile was different now. It was not a teasing smile. It was a smile of someone who had seen something new. "You did not fall," she said. Ryan nodded. "I told you. Humans can fly." The wind moved softly around them. The Ikran lowered its head near Ryan's shoulder. The Skyborn had seen many things in their training fields, but this moment was something they would remember. The challenge had begun, but the story was far from over. The soft golden light of morning spread across the floating cliffs of Oran. A gentle wind moved through the vines that hung from the edge. The sound of distant birds filled the air with soft music. The Skyborn training camp was awake early. Today was not an ordinary day. Everyone had heard what happened yesterday. A human had touched an Ikran and had not been thrown away. A human had flown, even if for only a short time. For the Skyborn, this was something no outsider had done before. Ryan stood at the edge of the training ground once again. His black flight gloves were pulled tight. His eyes looked calm, but inside he could feel the weight of what was about to happen. His first flight with the Ikran had only been a short jump and glide. It was not enough to prove anything. Many thought it was only luck. Today would decide more. Today he had to truly fly. The blue Ikran belonging to Lyra stood beside him. Its wings stretched wide in the morning sun. Its body moved with quiet strength. Its eyes glowed like deep blue stones. It looked at Ryan with a steady gaze. Yesterday it had allowed him on its back. Today it would decide if he was truly worthy to ride it again. The training field slowly filled with Skyborn trainees. They stood in groups, whispering among themselves. Some still doubted Ryan. Some wanted to see if he could really fly. Others were simply curious. A few older riders stood near the front, watching with careful eyes. Their Ikran rested behind them like silent shadows. Lyra walked toward the front of the crowd. Her silver hair shone in the light. Her wings folded neatly against her back. She carried the same strong and proud look she always did, but there was something new in her eyes today. It was not just challenge. It was curiosity, too. She stopped a few steps away from Ryan. "You flew once," she said in a clear voice, "but that was only the wind carrying you. Today the sky will decide if you are real." Ryan nodded. He did not speak long words. He knew nothing he said would change the minds of those watching. Only the sky would. The wind would be his answer. Lyra raised her hand toward her Ikran. The creature stepped forward with smooth movements. Its wings lifted slightly, catching the breeze. Its shadow stretched across the white stone ground. The sound of its claws against the stone was steady and strong. The Skyborn whispered again. No one had ever seen a human ride the same Ikran twice. Ryan took a breath and stepped toward the creature. Each step felt longer than the last. The Ikran tilted its head slightly as he approached. Its eyes stayed locked on his. The wind brushed against his face. He lifted his hand again, slowly, just like he did yesterday. The Ikran made a low sound, but it did not move back. Ryan placed his palm gently on its neck. The creature's skin was warm and smooth. He could feel the pulse of its life under his hand. It felt alive, strong, and free. He whispered softly, not in Skyborn language, not in any special words, just a calm sound. The Ikran blinked slowly. Ryan took that as a good sign. He climbed onto the saddle again. His boots found their place on the side rests. His hands held the straps. His body leaned forward, following the shape of the creature. The wind lifted a few strands of his hair. The Ikran opened its wings fully. They were wide, strong, and beautiful. Lyra stepped closer to the edge of the cliff. Her voice rose above the wind. "If you fall today, you will not get another chance," she said. "The sky gives one test to each heart." Ryan gave a short nod. He was ready. The Ikran bent its legs slightly, ready to leap. Its wings moved with the rhythm of the wind. Then it pushed off the ground with powerful force. For a moment, the world below disappeared. The sky opened wide in front of them. The wind struck Ryan's face, but he did not close his eyes. He kept them open, watching the blue horizon. The Ikran spread its wings and caught the rising air. It did not glide gently this time. It flew fast, turning sharply to the left, then to the right. It was testing him. It wanted to see if he truly belonged on its back. Ryan tightened his grip but kept his body flexible. He moved with the turns instead of against them. His heart beat hard inside his chest, but his mind stayed clear. They rose higher above the cliffs. The floating stones below looked smaller and smaller. Clouds passed around them like soft white rivers. The wind was louder up here. It roared in his ears, but it felt alive. He had flown many ships and machines before, but this was different. This was not cold metal. This was a living creature. It was not a tool. It was a partner. Lyra and the other Skyborn watched from the training ground. Her arms were crossed, but her eyes were fixed on the two figures in the sky. She had seen many strong riders, but never a human who could match the movements of an Ikran so quickly. The Ikran suddenly made a sharp dive toward the ground. The crowd gasped. Ryan leaned forward, pressing his chest against the creature's back. The wind pushed against his face, but he did not lose balance. The dive ended in a wide, smooth curve, and they shot back into the sky again. It was like being part of the wind itself. Ryan began to understand the rhythm of the Ikran's wings. He could feel the small movements in its muscles before each turn. He learned to shift his weight at the right time. The creature was testing him less and responding more. This was not yet a full bond, but it was a start. They circled the tallest cliff. The sunlight reflected off the Ikran's blue feathers, making them glow like polished glass. Ryan felt a strange feeling rise in his chest. It was not fear. It was something like joy. The sky felt open. It felt like it belonged to him. Down below, the Skyborn trainees grew silent. Even those who had laughed yesterday now stared with wide eyes. One of the older riders whispered to another that the Ikran was flying with him, not against him. That meant something important. It meant the creature was beginning to trust. Lyra could not hide her surprise. She had expected him to fall or at least lose control. But he was flying like someone who had trained with Ikran for years. She felt a mix of shock and something else deep inside. It was a small spark of respect. The Ikran climbed higher. Ryan leaned forward. The wind around them grew stronger. The creature tilted its wings and began a spiral movement upward. It was a classic training path used by young riders. It tested balance, speed, and connection. Ryan followed each turn. He made mistakes in the first few spirals. His grip too tight or his weight a little off, but he adjusted fast. The creature noticed. It responded smoothly. When they reached the top of the spiral, the Ikran made a wide glide across the open sky. Below them, the cliffs stretched like islands floating in a sea of clouds. The sunlight painted everything gold. Rian let out a quiet breath. He had not spoken a single word since the flight began. The bond was not built on talking. It was built on trust and feeling. The Ikran gave a small cry. It sounded less like a warning and more like a greeting. Ryan smiled softly. He knew this was only the beginning, but it meant something. He gently tapped the creature's neck. "Thank you," he said in a low voice. Lyra saw the Ikran's cry. She knew what it meant. It meant the creature had accepted him, even if only for this moment. The crowd of trainees whispered loudly now. Some were excited. Some were confused. A few even clapped softly, unsure if they should or not. Rian guided the Ikran slowly back toward the training ground. The creature responded smoothly to his gentle pull on the straps. The landing was soft. Dust lifted slightly from the ground as its claws touched the stone. The wind around them slowed down. Ryan climbed down from the saddle with steady feet. His heart was still racing from the thrill of flight, but he stood tall. The Ikran remained calm beside him. It folded its wings and lowered its head slightly. That small gesture made the crowd react again. The creature was showing respect to the human rider. Lyra stepped forward through the trainees. Her silver hair moved in the wind. Her eyes stayed locked on Ryan. She stopped right in front of him. She did not smile. She did not frown. She looked at him as if trying to see something hidden. "No outsider has flown like that," she said. Ryan answered simply. "Then maybe I am not just an outsider." The crowd fell quiet. The words were not loud, but they carried weight. The older riders exchanged short glances. They knew what they had seen. They had trained many young Skyborn. They knew the signs of a true rider. Lyra looked at her Ikran. The creature was calm and proud. It had not rejected the human. Instead, it had flown with him as if they shared the same sky. She looked back at Rian again. "You still have more to prove," she said. "One flight is not enough," Ryan nodded. He already knew this. He did not want respect from one easy flight. He wanted to earn it. The wind carried a soft sound from the distant cliffs. The sun rose higher. The crowd began to break apart into smaller groups, still talking about what they had seen. Some came closer to look at the Ikran. Others kept their distance, but no one laughed anymore. Lyra walked a few steps away but stopped. She turned her head slightly toward him. "Tomorrow," she said. The storm ring. The storm ring was a path in the sky where strong winds twisted between high cliffs. Only riders with true bonds could pass through it. Many trainees took weeks before they were ready. Ryan had only been here a few days. The challenge was clear. Rian looked at her and nodded once. "Tomorrow." She gave a small smile, not mocking, but sharp like the wind. Then she walked away. Her silver wings caught the light as she moved. The next morning arrived with a clear, bright sky. A soft breeze passed through the floating cliffs of Oran. Golden light spread across the stone paths, and the sound of wind brushed against the vines hanging over the edge. The Skyborn training camp was full of movement and quiet energy. Everyone knew what was going to happen today. Ryan, the only human in the camp, was going to face the storm ring. The storm ring was a natural path between tall, floating cliffs. Strong air currents moved through it like spinning rivers. It was not dangerous in the way that harmed anyone, but it was difficult. Many Skyborn trainees failed their first attempts. To fly through the storm ring, a rider and their Ikran had to trust each other fully. If they moved against one another, they lost control. If they moved together, they glided through as one. It was a test that separated beginners from real riders. Rian stood near the edge of the training ground again. He wore his black gloves and his light flight vest. His face looked calm, but his chest carried the weight of what was about to happen. He had flown with the blue Ikran only twice. No one expected him to make it through the storm ring on his first try. Some believed he would not even make it halfway. But Rian was not the kind of person who gave up before trying. The wind was wild, but it did not scare him. The blue Ikran, Lyra's Ikran, stood beside him. Its body moved with steady breaths. Its wings stretched out a little to feel the morning air. Its eyes stayed fixed on the distant cliffs. It seemed to understand where they were going. It had flown the storm ring many times with Lyra, but flying with Ryan was new. The creature would decide if it trusted him enough to do this together. The training ground filled with skyborn trainees. They stood in groups, watching from the side. Their wings folded neatly behind them. Some whispered to each other. A few were excited to see if he could do it. Some were waiting to see him fail. And a few stood silently, watching with serious faces. Among them were the older riders who had flown the storm ring many times. Their faces carried calm strength. They understood how difficult this flight would be. Lyra walked to the front. Her silver hair shone in the sunlight. Her posture was tall and proud. She looked at Ryan without the same mocking smile she once had. Her eyes were sharper now, serious but not unkind. She raised her hand and pointed toward the high cliffs. "The storm ring is waiting," she said in a clear voice. "It will not show mercy, not to me, not to you, not to anyone. If you want to be a true rider, this is where you prove it." Ryan nodded. He had heard about the storm ring since the day he arrived. He knew it was not a test of strength, but of trust. The air currents inside the ring twisted and turned like living things. If he tried to control the Ikran too hard, they would both fail. If he trusted too little, they would be thrown out. But if they trusted each other, they would pass through smoothly. Lyra stepped closer to her Ikran. She touched its neck gently and whispered a few quiet words in her own language. The Ikran let out a soft sound and turned its head toward Ryan. She looked at him with serious eyes. "If you are not ready, step back now," she said. "The storm ring is no place for hesitation." Ryan shook his head slowly. "I am ready." She studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Then fly well." Ryan stepped toward the Ikran. The creature lowered its head slightly as if acknowledging him. He lifted his hand and placed it on its warm skin. He could feel its heart beating under the feathers. The wind brushed against them. It was not just him facing this challenge. It was both of them. This was their test. He climbed onto the saddle with steady movements. His boots found their place on the rests and his hands gripped the straps. He leaned forward, feeling the rhythm of the Ikran's breathing. The creature opened its wings fully. The blue feathers shone like water under the morning sun. The crowd fell silent. The wind filled the air with its song. The Ikran pushed off the ground. Ryan's body lifted with it as they rose high into the sky. The floating cliffs passed below them. The air felt colder and faster the higher they went. Ryan's heartbeat followed the rhythm of the wings. Every flap carried strength and balance. From the ground, the storm ring looked like a dark curve of air between cliffs. But from above, it was a moving tunnel of twisting wind. Ryan could see the path clearly now. It was narrow and unpredictable. The edges of the cliffs were lined with glowing blue stones that guided riders through the path. The strong wind currents could be seen swirling like waves. It was both beautiful and intimidating. The Ikran let out a sharp cry. Ryan felt the sound through its body. It was a cry of focus. The creature knew what was ahead. Ryan lowered his body, making himself part of its shape. He remembered the lessons he had learned during their short flights. He had to move with it, not against it. They reached the entrance of the storm ring. The first gust of wind hit them. It was strong, like a wall of moving air. Ryan held on but did not tighten too hard. The Ikran leaned forward, letting the wind guide its wings. They entered the ring. The first turn came fast. The air twisted to the left. The Ikran tilted its body, folding one wing slightly to catch the curve. Ryan followed the movement. He shifted his weight at the right moment, and they slid through the curve smoothly. The sound of wind filled his ears. It was not a soft breeze anymore. It was a living force around them. The second gust came from below. It lifted them up suddenly. Ryan adjusted his grip and leaned with the motion. The Ikran responded quickly. Its wings spread wide to balance the sudden lift. They moved through the air like a single shape. Down below, the skyborn trainees watched with wide eyes. Inside the storm ring, the air currents changed every few breaths. Some moved fast, some turned sharp. Ryan kept his eyes forward but trusted the creature beneath him. The Ikran had flown here many times with Lyra. It knew the paths. It knew the wind. But it needed to know if Ryan trusted it too. That trust was the heart of this flight. Halfway through the ring, the strongest turn came. It was a spiral curve with a sharp drop at the end. Many skyborn trainees failed here the first time. The Ikran tucked its wings slightly. leaned hard into the spiral and dropped fast. Ryan felt the world spin for a moment, but he held his balance. He matched his movement with the creature. His body was no longer fighting to stay on. It was flowing with the wind. The spiral opened into a wide glide path. The Ikran stretched its wings to full length again. The wind carried them forward smoothly. Ryan felt the speed but also the calm. The sound of the wind was no longer a roar. It was a song. It was as if the air had accepted him. The Ikran cried again, this time softer. It was not a warning. It was a voice of agreement. Down below, the Skyborn began to talk louder. Some pointed upward. Some clapped their hands. Lyra watched silently. She had flown through the storm ring many times. She knew how hard it was to get through the spiral on the first try. Her face remained calm, but her heart was surprised. Ryan and the Ikran passed the last curve. The wind turned soft again. The bright open sky appeared ahead of them. They were out of the storm ring. The floating cliffs opened wide before them. The wind no longer pulled and pushed. It lifted them gently. The creature glided forward with proud, strong wings. Ryan let out a long breath. His chest felt light, not heavy. He reached forward and patted the Ikran's neck softly. "We did it," he whispered. The Ikran tilted its head slightly and its wings beat once, strong and proud. They circled back toward the training ground. When they landed, the crowd of trainees burst into noise. Some shouted in excitement. Some clapped their hands. A few still stood silent, unable to believe what they had seen. The blue Ikran lowered its wings and stood tall beside Ryan. It did not move away from him. It stood close, like a trusted partner. Lyra walked toward him slowly. Her silver hair moved gently in the wind. Her eyes stayed on the creature, then on Ryan. There was no mocking smile on her face now. There was a new light in her eyes, a mix of respect and surprise. "You passed," she said. Her voice was not loud, but everyone heard it. Ryan nodded. He did not speak more than he needed to. "We passed," he answered, looking at the Ikran. Lyra looked at her creature again. It had accepted him fully now. That was something no Skyborn had expected. She stepped closer to Ryan. "The storm ring does not lie," she said. "It accepts only those who are true in the sky." The older riders stepped forward. One of them, a tall Skyborn with golden wings, spoke. "The human has done what many of our kind failed to do on their first try," he said. "This flight will be remembered." The trainees fell quiet. Ryan did not boast. He did not raise his hands in victory. He stood with the Ikran, calm and steady. The wind moved softly around them. He could still feel the rhythm of the flight in his body. He had earned the creature's trust in the sky. Lyra took one more step toward him. Her voice lowered. "Tomorrow there will be a race," she said. "Not just for you, for all riders. I will not hold back." Ryan met her eyes. "Good," he said. She gave a small smile, but this time it was not sharp or teasing. It was real. The crowd slowly moved away, but their voices filled the air. They spoke about the human who had flown through the storm ring. The legend had started to grow. The wind carried their words across the cliffs. Ryan stayed with the Ikran for a while. He placed his hand on its neck again, feeling The sun rose slowly above the floating cliffs. The sky was painted with orange and gold. Thin clouds drifted across the wind stream, soft and glowing. The camp of the Skyborn was awake early. Sounds of wings and wind filled the air. Ikran riders were getting ready for the day's training. It was a day of great importance because the Storm Ring Challenge was waiting. Ryan stood near the cliff's edge. He was wearing the flight harness the Skyborn had made for him after his first flight. It was light, strong, and made from woven sky fiber. He placed his hand on the Ikran's neck. The creature responded with a soft cry. The bond between them had grown since that first day. Lyra walked toward him, her step steady. Her wings folded behind her back. Her eyes carried the same proud light, but there was something different in her expression. She did not look at him as a stranger anymore. She looked at him as a rider. She raised her hand and pointed toward the horizon. She said that the storm ring was the real test. Anyone could ride an Ikran once, but only true riders could pass through the storm ring. It was a wide loop of moving wind paths that formed around an ancient floating island. It was filled with strong wind, twisting airstreams and glowing energy fields. It was not dangerous in a harmful way, but it demanded full control of mind and body. The other Skyborn gathered near the flight platforms. They wanted to see what the human rider could do. Some of them believed he would give up. Others were not sure. A few who had seen his bond with the Ikran thought maybe he had a chance. Rian looked at the sky. He was not afraid. He had flown through storms before on Earth. He knew how to trust the wind. He placed both hands on the Ikran's strong back and climbed on. The creature spread its wide wings. The air around them grew warmer as the wind streams lifted higher. Lyra climbed onto her own Ikran. It was fast, graceful, and known across the camp for its speed. She looked at Ryan and said that the storm ring was not a game. To complete it, he needed to trust the sky, not fight it. Ryan gave a short nod. He had already learned that lesson. The signal horn sounded. The wind picked up. Both Ikran ran forward, then leaped off the cliff with power. The world opened beneath them. The floating islands grew smaller as they climbed higher into the wind streams. Rian felt the familiar rush of air against his face. He leaned forward and let the Ikran guide the first turn. Lyra's Ikran stayed close on the right. The other riders remained behind, watching from a distance. They were not part of the race. This was between Lyra and Ryan. As they approached the storm ring, the glowing light became clear. It was a wide loop of wind that circled a massive floating rock covered in shining blue stones. The storm ring shifted and twisted like a living thing. Strong wind rushed through it. The energy streams moved like waves. Lyra took the lead at first. Her Ikran curved sharply into the first wind tunnel. She leaned into the turn with skill. She had flown here many times. She knew how to move with the air. Rian followed close behind. The first turn came fast. He felt the wind push at his side. He remembered what Lyra said before the flight. He did not fight the wind. He let it carry him forward. The Ikran responded with power. Together they moved through the glowing tunnel. The second loop was narrower. Lyra's Ikran tilted sharply, wings cutting through the air like a blade. Ryan copied her angle. The wind tried to push him outward, but he shifted his weight slowly. The Ikran understood his movement and adjusted its wings. They made the turn cleanly. The crowd watching from the cliff platforms gasped. They did not expect a human to follow the skyborne pilot so smoothly. Lyra glanced over her shoulder. For a moment she saw Rian's face. He was calm, focused, and steady. He was not trying to beat her. He was flying with the sky. She pushed her Ikran faster. She wanted to see how far he could go. The third turn was known as the spiral gate. It spun with a strong pull that could make new riders lose balance. Lyra entered it without fear. Her Ikran dove into the spiral. The wind spun around them in circles. Ryan followed a heartbeat later. The spiral wrapped around him like a fast river. Rian remembered the training he had with Earth aircraft. In storms, panic only made the wind stronger. Calm made it gentle. He closed his eyes for half a second, listened to the flow, then opened them again. The Ikran tilted smoothly and followed the spiral upward. They broke out of the spiral gate together. The sunlight hit their faces. The crowd roared. Halfway through the course, the wind grew louder. The storm ring was known to change patterns in the middle of the flight. The wind streams shifted direction, and the glowing energy paths twisted into new shapes. This was where most riders made mistakes. Lyra's Ikran drifted slightly to the left. The new pattern surprised even her. Ryan saw it happen. He slowed down just enough to follow a cleaner path. He moved his Ikran under the shifted wind and then came up next to her. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. She did not expect him to read the wind so fast. Rian did not speak. He only nodded. His calmness told her something she had never felt from another skyborne rider. He was not trying to win against her. He was flying with her. The next loop was the cross stream. Two strong wind paths collided here. If a rider moved wrong, the wind would push them out of the course. Lyra's Ikran entered first. The wind shoved against her wings. Ryan saw it and adjusted his angle. His Ikran moved like water through the gap. For a moment, they flew side by side. Two riders. Two Ikran, one human, one skyborne. The wind carried them forward like equals. At the last turn, the finish line glowed with bright light. The crowd leaned over the platform to watch. The last loop was the sky gate. It demanded perfect timing. Lyra leaned forward. Her Ikran shot ahead like a bright arrow. Ryan followed. The gate grew larger with every second. The wind was strong. The finish was close. Both Ikran entered the sky gate together. The wind wrapped around them. The light flashed as they crossed. No one could tell who finished first. They landed on the other side of the cliff with smooth precision. Lyra jumped down from her Ikran. Her wings folded behind her. She turned to look at Rian. For a long moment she said nothing. The crowd was silent too. Then she stepped forward and raised his hand high into the air. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Skyborn shouted his name. They had never seen a human complete the storm ring before, let alone match their best rider. The elders of the Skyborn walked forward. Their long wing robes trailed behind them. One of them spoke with a clear voice. He said that Rian had proven himself as a rider. The storm ring was a place of skill and spirit, and he had shown both. Rian looked at the Ikran he rode. The creature let out a proud cry. He placed his hand on its neck. He knew this flight was not only a test of skill but also of trust. Lyra stood beside him. She said that when she first gave him the challenge, she did not believe he could do it. But now she understood that courage was not about being born with wings. It was about flying with heart. The other riders gathered around them. Many reached out to touch his shoulder or greet the Ikran. Rian did not feel like an outsider anymore. He felt like part of the sky. As the sun began to set, the two Ikran rose again into the sky, not as rivals but as partners. The glowing trails of wind reflected off their wings. Rian and Lyra flew side by side over the floating cliffs, letting the wind guide them. The Storm Ring Challenge became a story that spread through the camp that night. Around every fire and every platform, Skyborn spoke about the human pilot who matched their best rider. They spoke of trust, of courage, and of the way he flew without fear. The elders decided that the Storm Ring would now be open to all riders no matter where they came from. It would no longer be a Skyborn-only tradition. It would be a symbol of unity. Rian stood on the highest platform after the flight. He looked up at the stars. The wind brushed against his face again. It felt like the sky itself welcomed him. Lyra stood beside him. She did not tease him this time. She simply smiled and said that the sky was big enough for both of them. Rian smiled back. The night grew quiet. The Ikran rested on their nests. The stars reflected on the wind streams. Rian closed his eyes and took a deep breath. This world was no longer a place where he was only a guest. It had become his home among the clouds. The night after the Storm Ring Challenge was filled with light and sound. Lanterns floated in the air like small stars. The Skyborn had gathered on the wide stone platforms of their floating city. The wind carried the soft music of their wing instruments. The celebration was not just for Lyra or Rian. It was for something bigger. For the first time, a human and a Skyborn rider had flown through the storm ring side by side as equals. Rian stood near the edge of the platform. He could see the glowing rings of wind swirling above the floating cliffs. He could still feel the rush of the flight in his chest. His hands were steady, but his heart carried the memory of every turn, every gust, every moment when he had trusted the sky. His Ikran stood beside him, its wings folded neatly, its eyes bright and calm. Lyra approached him slowly. Her steps were light and her wings shimmered in the lantern glow. She stopped beside him and followed his gaze toward the night sky. For the first time since they had met, there was no teasing in her voice. She spoke softly and told him that what happened in the storm ring was more than a race. It was a change. The Skyborn elders stood at the center of the platform. Their wing robes moved with the wind. When they spoke, every voice in the gathering grew quiet. They said that the sky had accepted something new. A human had flown with a Skyborn. A bond had formed between two riders of different worlds. They declared that from that day forward, the Storm Ring would no longer be a challenge for Skyborn alone. It would be open to all who carried courage in their hearts. The crowd responded with loud cheers. Some riders raised their wings. Some tapped their flight sticks on the stone. It was a sound of acceptance. Rian had not only proved himself as a rider, he had changed a tradition that had lasted for many seasons. After the speech, the elders asked Rian to step forward. He walked toward the center with slow, steady steps. His Ikran followed behind him like a silent shadow. The elders placed a silver wing pendant around his neck. It was a symbol of a true Skyborn rider. Only those who had proven their spirit in the air received it. Lyra smiled as she watched the pendant shine in the lantern light. When she had first challenged him, she had done it to make him give up. But he had done the opposite. He had made her believe that the sky was not something only the Skyborn could own. It was something anyone brave could share. After the ceremony, music filled the air again. Some Skyborn danced on the wind platforms. Others fed their Ikran sweet air fruits from the floating trees. Rian sat on the platform with Lyra. The wind was gentle. The stars were clear. She asked him why he had accepted the challenge when almost everyone thought he would fail. He answered with a small smile. He told her that back on Earth, humans had always looked at the sky and dreamed of flying. For his people, flight was more than skill. It was hope. When she had given him that challenge, he could not say no. Lyra nodded slowly. She understood now why his eyes had never shown fear during the flight. He had not flown to prove himself better. He had flown to prove that the sky could belong to anyone who dared to rise. The next morning came with bright golden light. A soft breeze passed over the floating cliffs. Ryan woke up early. He stood on the platform with his Ikran. The creature stretched its wings wide. Ryan placed his hand gently on its neck. Their bond felt stronger than ever. Lyra joined him a few moments later. She said that she had a plan. She wanted to take him beyond the storm ring to a place few riders ever visited. It was called the Sky Veil. It was far above the floating islands where the clouds turned silver and the air carried soft light. It was a place where the oldest riders went to find peace. Ryan agreed at once. He climbed onto his Ikran and Lyra climbed onto hers. With a single leap, both creatures rose into the air. The camp below grew smaller and smaller as they climbed higher. The wind grew cooler. The clouds became thin like silk. The flight was calm and smooth. The Ikran moved together like they had always been partners. The air grew brighter as they passed the highest cliffs. When they finally reached the Sky Veil, the view opened before them like a living dream. The clouds formed long white paths that sparkled under the sun. The wind was soft like a warm hand. The light was so bright that it made their eyes shine. Lyra told him that only the most trusted riders brought someone here. This was the place where skyborn riders came to talk to the wind. She had never thought she would bring a human here, but after the storm ring flight, everything had changed. They landed on a flat cloud platform that floated between two tall wind pillars. The Ikran folded their wings and rested. Ryan and Lyra stood side by side and watched the horizon. There was no noise here, only the quiet song of the wind. Lyra told him a story about how the Skyborn believed the wind carried the voices of all who had flown before them. She said that when a rider stood here and closed their eyes, they could hear those voices. Ryan did as she said. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, he felt nothing but silence. Then he felt something soft like a breeze touching his mind. It was not words, but it was a feeling of welcome. He opened his eyes and saw Lyra smiling. She said that the Sky Veil had accepted him too. They stayed on the platform for a long time. They talked about their worlds. Ryan told her about the small planes humans built. Lyra told him about the first Skyborn who learned to ride the Ikran. They laughed at their differences and smiled at their shared love for the sky. When they returned to the camp, the other riders greeted them warmly. A group of young Skyborn asked Ryan if he could teach them how humans flew machines. In return, they wanted to show him their best tricks with the wind. Ryan agreed happily. He never thought he would teach flying to a race that was born with wings, but the idea made him smile. Days turned into weeks. The Skyborn and Ryan trained together. Lyra often flew with him not as a rival but as a partner. They built a new kind of flight where human instinct and Skyborn wind skill worked as one. The elders watched these flights with interest. They saw how fast the young riders were learning from Ryan. They also saw how Ryan learned from them. Something new was forming in the sky. A bond that went beyond species. One evening, Lyra told Ryan that there was going to be a grand sky festival. It was held once every 10 years. Riders from every Skyborn island would come to fly together and show their skill. She said that he should fly with her in the opening flight. It would be the first time in Skyborn history that a human would take part. Ryan agreed without hesitation. On the day of the festival, the sky filled with thousands of glowing lanterns. The platforms were crowded with Skyborn from far and wide. The sound of wind music rose into the air. The elders announced the beginning of the festival. Lyra and Ryan stood on the front platform. Their Ikran stretched their wings wide. The crowd waited in silence. When the signal horn sounded, both riders leaped into the sky together. They flew high over the gathering. The two Ikran moved in perfect harmony. Their wings caught the wind and turned it into smooth, flowing movement. The crowd below cheered as they performed wide circles, gentle dives, and high loops. Other riders joined them one by one. Soon the sky was filled with hundreds of Ikran and riders weaving patterns through the air. Ryan and Lyra led the formation. Their flight was not the fastest or the most powerful, but it carried something the others felt deep in their hearts. It carried unity. When they landed, the crowd roared with joy. The elders raised their hands and declared that a new chapter in Skyborn history had begun. From that day forward, humans and Skyborn would fly together. The Storm Ring and the Sky Veil would no longer belong to one race alone. Rian stood beside Lyra as the lantern light danced on their faces. He looked at the sky and remembered the day she had challenged him with that teasing voice. She had not believed in him then, but that moment had started everything. The Ikran beside them let out a strong cry that echoed through the cliffs. It was a sound of pride and belonging. Lyra turned to him and smiled. She told him that now he was no longer just a guest in their world. He was a rider of the sky. Ryan smiled back. He looked at the wide sky above them. It no longer felt distant. It felt like home. As the night deepened, lanterns floated higher and higher until they disappeared into the stars. The Ikran slept on their nests. The Skyborn celebrated with music. Ryan closed his eyes and let the wind touch his face. He felt free. He felt like a part of the sky. The legend of the human who rode the proud Ikran spread far beyond the camp. It reached other Skyborn islands and even traveled back to Earth. It became a story about trust, courage, and how one flight changed everything. And somewhere far above the floating cliffs, the wind carried that story through the night sky like a gentle song.